Today we're going to talk about the board. And not only do we use this board for a workflow standpoint, we also utilize the board from a training and educating of our employee standpoint. Real quick, just a quick overview of the actual board itself. If you notice in the left upper hand corner, we have Board Manager 1 and Board Manager 2. So what happens is the individual for the day that's actually going to run the board, we put in Board Manager number 1. And that's normally the open shift manager. Normally our general managers will come in and actually open their stores, and they will be in Board Manager 1. So their name is going to go in that spot. Now, when that general manager leaves for the day, because our shops are open from 7 to 7, and the opening manager may come in at work from 7 to 6, so he's going to leave, it in charge with the closing manager for the day. In that case, the closing manager, his name is going to be in the left upper hand corner where you see Board Manager number 2. If you look in the right upper hand corner, we have what they call a technician rotation. And what a technician rotation is the fact of when technicians show up in the morning, that's exactly how their names get put on the rotation. If you have a technician, Jim, and he's the first technician in, then he's the first one that actually gets put in the rotation. You've got Fred comes in the second, he'll get the second rotation, and then the technicians, that's how they actually get in the rotation. Now, as the new traffic comes in for the day, the first technician that came in for the day will actually get the first work order for the day. And that's how we keep everything even. And the reason that is very important is simply because of the standpoint that there's always confusion about, hey, he got that job, it should have been mine. No, he got that job, it should have been mine. So what this does is it keeps everybody on the same playing field. Now it's even. If you want to get in rotation early, your technicians need to show up early. Customers have the same patterns, and they all have the same buying patterns. And what I mean by that is that if a customer has a broke car, they normally are going to bring that car in early in the morning at 7 or 8 o'clock because they know that, hey, they're going to have to leave that car. They know it's broke. They know they're going to have to leave it and give that shop the time it's going to take to fix the car. Well, you have to educate your technicians that all of the broke cars come in the morning. So if you're one of the first technicians in, you're almost guaranteed to see most of the broke cars for the day. You always have that one technician that wants to slide in at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and he's always the one complaining about he doesn't have any hours for the week. Well, now what we've got from a training aspect, we've got documentation to show that technician the reason why you're not making any money is because you're showing up to work at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we've already dispatched all the broke cars for the day. So that's just one training tool. It also is a tool from the standpoint that it's going to motivate that technician to show up at 7 o'clock or whenever the doors open. He wants to make sure he gets put in the rotation early. So that's what you see from our technician rotation, and that's how we keep everything on the same playing field. You also have what we call a regular, and then you'll see the line under regular, and then you see LOF and PMI. What we do with our technicians is we break our customers up into two different categories. The first category is what we call a broke car, which means if a customer comes in and has a check engine light, a brake noise, an oil leak, something where we know that it's going to be broke and we're going to get some hours on that car in order to fix that car, what we do is we call that a broke car. So that's what we call the regular rotation. The other category that we have is an oil change, lube oil and filter, or PMI, preventive maintenance inspection. That's another category, and that also has its own rotation, and what those are state inspections and oil changes. Or if a customer comes in and wants a free flat repair or something very minor, a very small maintenance item, we consider that a second category, and that's an oil change rotation is what we call it. So now what's happening is that technician, he's got two rotations working. It's extremely important to him to make sure he gets there early enough to the point to where he's not only the first in rotation for the broke cars, he's also first in rotation for the maintenance oil change. With the industry changing and as fast-paced as it is, we all know that, in the late 90s, there were so many broke cars on the street, we didn't have to do oil changes. But because of the technology on cars and where everything's going, maintenance is going to be a big part of our world. So what happens is because now we have more oil changes and state inspection and more maintenance cars coming in, the broke cars, a lot of your technicians, they're just old school and they hate oil changes. So the reason why we came up with the rotation is because now we can prove to the technical team that everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody's going to get the same amount of oil changes as everybody else. It's not like that one guy's going to see, get 5 oil changes and the other technician is only going to get 1. It doesn't work like that. That's why we're a rotation. Everybody stays on the same playing field. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is when you look under the daily schedule, we have our logo in the middle of the board, and then on the left-hand side, we have what we call our daily schedule. We call that our workflow. Now, if you look at this board, we've got manager, invoice, customer name, times called, vehicle, service, parts in, parts out, key, mechanic, isolate, and PMI. And then there's a bunch of squares underneath those columns. We call that bullet holes, okay? So what we want to do is we try to fill those bullet holes up with something. And this is where we get into the management, the training, as well as the workflow. So we start with the manager. If you look in the far left-hand corner, under the daily schedule, under the manager, what we do there is the manager that's actually working that invoice, we're going to put his initials in that category, okay? Then we have what we call invoice. If, I don't know what point of sale system you're working, but everything's going to generate an invoice, whether it's RO Wright or Mitchell or whatever you're using. You take that RO number, and that's going to be basically your invoice number. We have the customer's name. We normally just put the customer's last name there. We have our time stamps or time called. Every time we communicate with that customer, we're going to put that time, we're going to mark that time down. That's very important in this industry. If you were to go to AAA and some of these places, and you were to get the information, what's one of the worst things that people hate about automotive repair, one of the number one problems is communication. A customer will drop their car off in the morning at 8 o'clock, and then nobody will call them throughout the day to let them know what's going on with their car. That's one of the main complaints that consumers have about automotive repair centers. So time stamps, time calls, very important. The vehicle, we put the make, model in there under the vehicle. The services of what the customer came in for. If a customer came in for an oil change or brake job, we just put quick notations, LOF, check brakes, or brake noise. The parts ordered, that's where we're going to actually order the part. We're going to put the initials, like if it's O'Reilly's or first call, we'll put FC in that column. Parts in is when the parts for the car, all of the parts for the car come in, we actually are going to check that off. The key number is every time a customer comes in, we put a key number on their keys so we don't lose their keys, and so we'll be able to stay up with their keys. The technician's initials are actually going to go in the mechanic field, and the reason why we put the technician's initial in there, it coincides with the technician rotation. So now the technicians, as the work is coming in throughout the day, the technicians will be able to go to their initials and look and go, okay, Jim, Ralph, Frank, Jim, Ralph, Frank, Jim, Ralph, Frank, to make sure that, hey, it's all on the same playing field. As the cars come in, that's the work order you're going to get, period. That's just the way it works. That way the technicians are always on the same playing field. So then we have what we call the isolate dollar amount, which is what the initial concern is. So if a customer came in for a brake job, and we sold them $500 worth of brakes, then that $500 is going to go in the isolate dollar amount there. Now, let's say we upsold them, a transmission service for $100. Then that $100 is going to go in the PMI column. Okay, so that's how we work that. Now, if the customer came in for front brakes and we sold them a front brake job, but we upsold them a brake flush, that is what we call a full system, and we'll get into that in a minute. But both the front brake job as well as the brake flush is one system, so that's going to go in the isolate column. Anything outside of that system that we've upsold is going to go in your PMI column. At the end of the day, your job as a manager is to maximize your productivity. And what this board allows us to do is to stay on top of the customer and stay on top of our employees. We always want to be ahead of our technical team. Too many times you can go into shops and you've got the technician back there reading the newspaper. Well, wait a second, you're not making a whole lot of money if that technician's reading the newspaper. So what we've got to do is we've got to make sure we stay on top. We're always a step or two ahead of the technician as well as the customer, and that's what this board allows us to do. You know, the main reason for the board, though, and the reason why we developed it, is because of the fact from a training standpoint. You know, when you look at it from a training standpoint, from the technical side, from the technician side, you know, a lot of guys will hire a technician, and when they hire that technician, he comes with 20 years of experience, and they throw him back in the shop, and they let him ride. The problem with that is that this industry is changing so fast that sometimes these technicians, even though they know how to work on cars, they don't know how to write cars up. So what we do is we take a little bit different approach in what we call full system isolate, cause and effect, and maintenance. There's a whole different piece to the sales process of actually presenting a repair to a customer. So one example, if you look at the technician rotation, one of the things that we do is that in order to train our technicians and to hold our technicians accountable, we go in there and we will actually look at a recheck. A good example is, you know, if I was to ask you, what is your ratio of rechecks? What is your percentage of rechecks in your shop for a week or a month? Well, at the end of the day, most shop owners can't give me that answer. They assume, you know, if they have 4 technicians out there, they can probably tell me which technician has the most rechecks, but they really can't give me a firm evidence. They don't have any hard data to see if you've got a technician that's got a recheck problem or not. So what we do is we have a couple different highlighter colors. If you look at our board, and one of the things that we do is we highlight from the word mechanic over. We're going to highlight that square. So we're going to highlight mechanic, isolate, and PMI. We're going to highlight that orange, okay, if that's a recheck. And so now what happens is that as the days and weeks go on, because now we've got the mechanic's initials as well as we've highlighted orange, then we've got some hard data to go to that technician, and it happens every time. The guy that's got the most rechecks is always the technician that wants to raise. That's just the way it works. So now if I have a technician coming to me that wants a raise, it's real simple. I'm going to pull out 2, 3, 4 weeks worth of boards, and I'm going to go through there, and I'm going to educate that technician that he's not wanting a raise. He's got too many rechecks. His ratio's too high from what he's working on compared to what is coming back from our customers. So here again, there's data, I've got the evidence, and now I can manage my technicians. 9 out of 10 times though, what happens is that we have technicians that have recheck problems. We go to the technician. We're going to have that meeting with a technician. We're going to have that one-on-one with a technician. We're going to pull 2 or 3, 4 or 5 days worth of store bags out, and we're going to open up that bag, and we're going to hold that technician accountable. Hey, look, you're doing a great job. You're turning a lot of hours, but you've got too many cars coming back on us. And we understand that that's going to hurt our customer service. So we can't have customers coming back on us. So you need to slow down. You need to road test these cars. You need to make sure they're fixed right before they leave. That's just one example. Now, am I training that technician? Absolutely. Am I holding that technician accountable? Absolutely. The only way to train somebody is to hold them accountable. Okay, so that's one color that we use, and that's one training tool that we can hold our technicians accountable. The other way we can hold them accountable, same deal from the word mechanic, isolate, and PMI, if it's a return PMI. Now what's a return PMI? A return PMI is that a technician does an oil change or he does a brake job and he recommended a valve cover gasket. and the customer didn't do it the day that they came in for the oil change or the brake job. But we documented it, and a week, 2, 3 weeks later, 2 months later, the customer comes back in for that valve cover gasket job. That's what we call a return PMI. Now, the good thing about a return PMI is it doesn't count in technician rotation. So that's just gravy money for the technician. So now they've generated a ticket, and that's not counted in their rotation. They're still in rotation for the next ticket. That encourages a technician to do oil changes into PMI cars. So now what we do is we highlight in blue return PMIs. Here again, it's another measuring tool, it's another accountability tool, it's another training tool. So now when I sit down with my technician, I'll pull 3 or 4 days, weeks of bags out, and I'll look at that board, I'll audit his boards, and I'll say, hey, you have a lot of oranges and you don't have any blues. Well, that's definitely not warranting a raise. I don't want to see any oranges, and I want to see a whole lot of blues. That guy, then we need to talk about maybe giving him some more money, as long as the return on investment's there. So that, here again, I've got the hard data. Now I can manage my people from the standpoint of the actual data that I have in utilizing the board. The other employee we have is the assistant manager or the management team. And what we do from training our managers of how we utilize the board to actually train our managers, that's where the isolate and the PMI come into play. All of our regular tickets, if you look at our rotation, all of our regular tickets, we highlight those green. And all of our PMI tickets, we highlight those pink. So now what happens is that we have 4 colors working this board. We have the broke cars, which is green, the PMI cars, which are pink, the rechecks, which are orange, as well as the return PMI, which is blue. So now what happens is that the technical team and the management team understands all day long the workflow and what the cars are coming in for, as well as it's allowing us to help train and develop our technical team as well as our management team on what to look for to give exceptional customer service. So now what happens is that we've got to now, how do we utilize this board to train our managers? It's real simple. We have this isolate and this PMI over here. And when you start looking at a manager, to me, there's 2 different managers out there. There's order taker and there's salesman. At the end of the day, that's how you dice them up. There's either order takers or there's salesmen, okay? Order takers make a certain amount of money and salesmen make a certain amount of money. And it's all about the return on investment, okay? So if I have an agreement with a salesman, okay, and I'm paying him salesman pay, then it's going to be real obvious to me, okay, on this board if he's actually selling automotive repair. And what I mean by that is, in this industry, I don't get worked up with a guy that can sell a bunch of broke cars. Because at the end of the day, you've got to think about that. A customer's got a broke car. They know, they drive to your location, they tell you their car's broke, it's got a brake noise, brake squeal. They leave you the keys and they drive away off your facility. Now, what's the odds of us selling that brake job? And if you can't sell that brake job, you need to find a different line of work, okay? Because at the end of the day, you don't have to sell the fact that the car's broke. The customer's telling you the car's broke. That's not salesmanship. True salesmanship, the brake job's a laydown. True salesmanship is selling that customer the transmission service which they didn't have a clue that they needed. That's salesmanship. That's what we call the PMI sale. So now I've got a measuring tool to where I can identify if I've got an order taker or if I've got a salesman. And it's real simple. The guys that have dollar amounts over here in the PMI column are salesmen, and the guys that don't are order takers. So now I can sit down, go through 3 or 4 days worth of business, 3 or 4 bags, 3 or 4 weeks worth of business, sit down with my sales team and pull out the data and say, hey, we've got a problem. I'm paying you X, I'm not getting Y in return. I've got to get Y in return. That's the agreement that we had. So we've got to figure out why you're not getting any upsells. So here again, am I holding that guy accountable? Am I training that guy? And now I've got the data to prove what his return on investment is. And more than anything, I want to help the guy. A lot of times I go into shops and general managers and guys, owners will tell you, man, I got a problem with this guy, I got a problem with this guy, I got a problem with this guy. I'll say, okay, well, what kind of problem you have? Well, he's not selling. Okay, well, let's show me the data. Well, what do you mean? Well, show me the information that he's not selling anything. So they don't even realize, they don't know what they don't know. And that's what this board utilizes. That's how we work the board. We've got the data that now we can manage our individuals. We can also use that data to help train those individuals. Now we're going to show you how to put that information on the board. The customer's going to come in and we're going to generate a work order. As soon as we generate that work order, we're going to go to the board and we're going to put the customer's last name and we're going to go in and put the time that customer came in. And then we're going to put the vehicle and the services. So we go from the work order straight to the board. Now what we've got to do is we've got to generate an invoice number or RO number out of our point of sale system. We go to our computer system, we generate an RO number, an invoice number, and then at that time we come over here and we put the invoice number. Those are the steps of generating an invoice number to get a customer on the board. From that point, we're going to look up in the technician rotation and we're going to see who's next in rotation. So at that time, we're going to put the mechanic or the general service personnel's initial actually in the mechanic field, as well as we're going to go up and we're going to mark that's his PMI or that's his regular repair order. So we're keeping the rotation, keeping everything consistent. Then at that point, we're going to dispatch the ticket out to the technician. Now, we don't have a manager. If you look over here at the board, there's a manager field. Just because you generated the invoice doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to work that ticket. So what's going to happen, we're going to leave that manager field blank until the technician turns the work order in. Once the technician turns the work order in and whatever manager works that ticket, that's the manager that we're going to actually put the initials in the manager field. So now we've got the assistant manager, if he's working that ticket, now we're going to be able to hold him accountable. Is he an order taker or is he a salesman? So now the technician turns it in. The management team prices the job out. Once the management team closes the sale, then at that point what they do is they come over here and they put the dollar amount of the isolate in the isolate column. Let's say they sold a $500 brake job. They go over here to the parts ordered column. Since we have multiple vendors that we're going to purchase parts from, we're going to draw an X through there. Let's say I have one from First Call, Napa, and a dealership. So I'm going to put those initials in those little bitty triangles. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my technician to start working on the repair. When the parts come in the parts in column, as the Napa part comes in, I'm going to check the Napa parts in. As the First Call parts come in, I'm going to check it in. As the dealership part comes in, I'm going to check it in. Now all of this is done with a pen. Once I know that all of the parts are here for not only the isolate sale, but let's say I upsold something, a transmission repair or something, I upsold something. Once I know that all the isolate parts are here and that all the PMI parts are here, and I've confirmed that those parts are correct. You know, we don't play that game with a technician where we order the parts at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and then at 5 o'clock in the evening, the technician comes to you and says, hey, this part's wrong. It doesn't work like that. When the parts come in, as soon as we get the parts, we're not allowed to check it until that technician tells us that this is the right part for that car. Once you got that confirmation that all of the parts are here and they're all correct, then in the parts in column, we're going to put a red check mark. We're going to put a red check mark in that square. That way we know as the management team, as the general manager, the owner, or the assistant manager, our job's over with. Now it's up to the technical team to finish the work. The only thing we have left to do is collect the money. Okay, so when I was running a board, my goal in life was to get a red check mark in the parts ordered screen or the parts in screen. That was my goal in life, because I knew that if I could get a red check mark in the parts in screen, my job was over with. So the main, from the standpoint of workflow management, we have stores that see 70, 80 cars on a Saturday. So think about that. You've got 70 or 80 cars on a Saturday. So at any one given time, you've got cars coming in and out. Now this is one day. How do you prioritize 70 customers? How do you prioritize 70 cars? How do you do it? If you're just running it off the cuff, you're not giving exceptional customer service. If you don't have a system in place, you're just winging it, you're not giving exceptional customer service. So that's what this board allows us to do. At any one given time in any one of my shops, you have to think to yourself, what should I be doing this second? How am I going to prioritize all 30, 40, 20, 50 of these cars? What should I be doing this second? Well, we've put a tool in place to educate our management team on exactly what they need to be doing that second. Okay, and that's what this board does. In our company, we train turning over a ticket. Let's say we have a particular manager and they go into a sale and they miss that sale. For whatever reason, the customer told the manager no. We train and prepare our managers before they go in and call that customer, or before they go in and talk to that customer. We train them to make sure they leave the ticket open. Then what we do is we turn that ticket over to another manager. The other manager goes in and tries to close the sale. Then at that time, and that manager successfully makes the sale, we go in and we draw a line through the manager's initials, and then on the upper left-hand corner, we put the new manager's initials in. So now, when we start looking at the board, we start looking at it now from a training aspect, and we look over there in the left-hand corner, we've got a pretty good idea that is that team turning those tickets over. So it's a real good tool for us to utilize to make sure the management team is doing everything that we're basically trying to tell them. And you'd be surprised. We probably run a 40-50% close ratio of going in and selling repairs, going in after sales and doing overcoming those objectives by that other manager making that sale. If we have a customer, we want to document on this board somewhere that we've got a customer waiting or not waiting, okay? 90% of the time, 95% of the time, if it's a pink ticket, it's probably going to be a waiting customer, because we know that those are light maintenance repairs like oil changes and state inspections, but not all the time. Sometimes a customer will come in, drop off their car for an oil change and go, eat lunch or come back in 4 or 5 hours. So what we do next to the manager field on the left-hand side, if the car is a waiter, if we have a waiting customer, then what we're going to do is we're going to put a check mark left of the manager's initial. So we can look down the very left side of the board and we can tell if that customer's waiting or not. That basically, because the waiting customer is the most important customer in the shop. It's the most important customer on the board is the brand new customer that just came in. Why is that the case? Because we understand it's all about speed of service. Speed of service, speed of service, speed of service. So that way the management team can look and see how many waiting customers that they have. Because as anybody that's worked in automotive repair, you've got that little old lady or whatever that comes in, or the old man or a young man or whoever comes in, they're waiting on the car, but they walk outside and they're walking, doing a smoke break outside. You lose track that they're even there. So the next thing you know, 40 minutes later, they walk back into your shop and you hadn't even moved their car. We've all been there. So what this allows us to do is it identifies that, hey, we've got this customer in here waiting. Now, let's say that they come in and they came in for an oil change, they're going to wait on an oil change. We did upsell them something off the oil change. Let's say we upsold them a brake job. At that time, we took them home. We utilized our customer shuttle and we took the customer home. Now they're not waiting. Then all we do in that check mark, we just draw an X through that check mark. So now we know that customer, okay, well, they were waiting, but now that we've got the X mark through the check mark, basically at the end of the day, that customer's not waiting anymore. So that's just an awareness factor that we don't have to focus on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about speed of service. You know, it's pretty evident over the last several years of this industry evolving to the maintenance world that, and we understand from the consumer that they're very time sensitive. Everybody that's ever taken in an oil change, the first word out of a customer's mouth is how long. So we know that they're time sensitive because of the fact that they're asking us a time question. How long for an oil change? How long for a state inspection? So what we do is we log that time that when they came in. Then what happens, we've learned over the last couple years that this is how the industry tries to upsell an oil change. Customer comes in for an oil change. They do the oil change. Takes 30, 40 minutes to do the oil change. Then after the car's complete, then they go into the waiting room and try to upsell the customer a transmission service or a brake job or something like that. That doesn't work. The customer, once they sit in there for 20, 30 minutes, they just want to get out of Dodge. They don't want anything but to get out of that shop. That's just the facts. I don't care how nice your shop is. They want out of there, okay? So what you've got to do from the standpoint of a speed of service is that we try to get that PMI back to that customer within 5-6 minutes. That's really our goal. So what's going to happen is now we've got the timestamp on the waiting customer. We've got a timestamp of when the car came in. Now what we're going to do is when we present the upsell to the customer, we're going to timestamp that. So if it came in at 8 o'clock, we put 8 o'clock down. We were able to get back to that customer by 8:06. We're going to put 8:06. Okay? And we're going to know if we've upsold something because we're going to have $30 in for the isolate and we're going to have $100 in for the transmission service. So we know if we upsold something on that repair or not. If there's a 0 in the PMI column, then we know we missed the upsell. So now what's going to happen is that when the vehicle leaves, we're also going to have a timestamp. So every waiting customer, we're looking for 3 timestamps. When it came in, when we presented the upsell on the PMI, as well as when the vehicle left. Okay? And that's going to give upper management as well as the management team, here again, it's another training tool, it's another accountability piece, and all of this stems from improving customer service. So now what happens is we've got that to where we can evaluate our team. When you look at the green ticket, which is a broke car ticket, we want 4 timestamps on those green tickets. The pink, the PMI ticket, there's 3. The broke car is a minimum of 4, if not 5, 6, or 7. And what that looks like is that we're going to timestamp it when it came in. We're going to timestamp it when we sold the isolate. We're going to timestamp it when we called the customer back to upsell on the PMI. And then we're going to timestamp it when we call them and tell them it's ready. So you remember earlier in the training we talked about one of the number one concerns that consumers have about automotive repair is lack of communication. They drop their car off at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and they don't hear anything from the customer for hours. So what we do through our system is we accomplish the goal of communication through forcing the management team to call the customer or to touch the customer at least 4 times. When it came in, we called them for the isolate, we called them for the PMI, then we called them and let them know their vehicle's ready. And a lot of our positive complaints that come into us through our emails and customers is the fact that they stayed in communication with me all day long. You'd be blown away how just communicating to the customer what's going on their car, how appreciative they are. Because they don't have a clue. Think about it. They drop their car off and the check engine light, they're scared to death. They don't know if it's a couple $100 repair or a couple $1,000 repair. So that communication is what they're looking for, and that's going to make sure that you get that retention of that customer, which is what we're all looking for. A couple other things. Let's say that it's the end of the day, and the actual board itself is complete. All the customers are left. We're going to have some customers, though, that left their vehicle overnight. We weren't able to get it all done. We're waiting on parts, whatever the case may be. So at that point, we're going to we're going to take that board and we're going to duplicate that board onto a brand new board, and we're only going to put the information on the cars that are left overnight onto the new board for the day. So now what's going to happen when we open up our store in the morning, I mean exactly how it's on the board is what we're going to duplicate. Check marks, everything. So now the new management team or the opener managers that come in the morning, they're going to be able to look at the board, and because we've done a really good job of parts in, parts ordered, if they're here, if they're not, who's working on the car, what the isolate cell was, what the PMI cell was, they're going to be able to pretty much look at that board and understand where they're at in the flow of that vehicle. So, and then under the very last work order, we're going to write the word deposit. And the reason why we write the word deposit, because here again, it's just a reminder to our management team that they're going to have to go to the bank and make that daily deposit on a daily basis. So then what happens is that when we start talking about when the vehicle leaves for the day, there's a couple spots on the board that we use a red Sharpie. And the only spots we can use a red Sharpie, we talked about one already, is when the parts are in. When all the parts are in for the full system isolate as well as the PMI, we put a red check mark. Once the vehicle is billed, once it's been billed in the computer system, which means that it's billed 100%, then through the time called column, we're going to put a red check mark. So we call it done billed. Done bill called. Okay, so when the vehicle's complete, we put a red line through the invoice number, and when we've called the customer, we put a C. So we call it done bill called. And in our business, you know, if I call a store up and say, hey man, how's it going for today? How's your car count? The lingo that we use is I've got $4,000 going out today and I've got $4,000 done bill called. Well, what that tells me is that they've got $4,000 that they're waiting on the customer. So there's probably going to be about $4,000 that's either going to pick up for that day, or some of that $4,000 may be carryover for the next day or two. But at least the work is complete. So at the end of the day, we've got $8,000 completed. And then when the vehicle leaves, we take that red Sharpie and we draw a line all the way through all of those boxes from manager all the way over to the PMI, and that way we know that that vehicle is off our parking lot. The only way we draw a red line is that when the vehicle is off our parking lot. That means we know that that vehicle, we're not responsible for that car at all. If the customer comes in and prepays, we don't draw a red line because the car's still on our parking lot. Okay? We notate that the car's been prepaid. So those are some of the tools, some of the training from the standpoint of workflow of how we basically manage our shop. So not only are we managing our employees, we're also managing our customers. And that's how we use it. And then real quick, I guess, you know, the main tool that I like to look at being an owner of a shop is I can come in and if I pull out some of these bags and I'm looking to evaluate that particular management team, I'm going to add up all of the isolate cells and I'm going to add up all of the PMI cells. And it's going to be real apparent to me if I've got a bunch of order takers working that shop or if I've got a bunch of salesmen working that shop. Okay, because you know you're looking for a ratio there. At least a 1-to-1 ratio, worst case scenario. The majority of the time, and you start working this true to form because of the maintenance cars that are coming in, you're going to be in several situations. You're going to be where you're selling 125, 150% more in maintenance than you are actually in isolate. It's just the facts. Of course, the industry doesn't look at it that way because they don't like upselling oil changes. But unfortunately, that's where the industry's going. In summary, this is why we use the board. The main reason is the fact that we use it for a training tool. It's a great tool to hold your technical team as well as your management team accountable to work in the concept and to go in and to work the systems that we put in place. In short, you're going to have happier employees, happier customers, and improve your profitability.